Right from the beginning, the philosophy was to champion single vineyards, special places where the soil, the microclimate, and the grape varietal were perfectly matched. Lytton Springs is one of those places. Paul Draper first met Dick Sherwin, who owned this vineyard back in 1972.
It was raining, and I pulled into the parking lot, and there was a big Cadillac with the big fins, and walked into the tasting room, which was a little tiny counter, and there was a guy standing there, and next to him was this very attractive woman with furs, and just, so out of place in this funky little tasting room that sold gallons and half gallons of wine. Good wine, really, my God, right up there. Turns out that this guy, his name was Dick Sherwin. I said, well, I'm Ridge Vineyards, and I was looking around for old vines. He said, oh, Ridge, fantastic. He said, listen, I just bought a vineyard just, less than a mile away or a mile away from here. So we went over to his place, which was Lytton Springs. I looked out over the vines there in the valley and up on the hills, where the hills then were beautifully complete. And of course, middle of winter, so these guys look like Greek soldiers, in formation. And I said, well, we'll take it. And he said, okay, I'd love to sell you the grapes. That was in '71, the winter. And so the next year, we took it and made the '72 Lytton Springs, and it lived up to everything that we would expect. Our contract from '72 on was based on a handshake. And in those days, handshakes in Northern California, at least, were sacrosanct. They were more important than a contract. Those years of '72 through '76, the Lytton Springs was the most consistent and simply one of the highest quality. Now, fast forward to 1990, we had succeeded in taking over the lease at Geyserville, and we're making it an estate wine. We heard that Lytton Springs was for sale. So we got together and said, okay, we're gonna buy this. So in 1990, we were able to buy Lytton. From that point on, we started making the wines and became ever more precise in what we were able to do. Two old friends came to me and said, there's somebody we would like you to interview. And I said, I'd love to. And so John came up and we sat down. And I would say within 15 minutes, maybe less, it was absolutely clear to me that I would hire this guy. And at the end, I said, John, I'd like to offer you a job as an assistant winemaker.
When I first came to California and started looking for work as a winemaker, I had just come from doing internships in France, and specifically in Burgundy. As I tasted wines over and over, I just kept finding that Zinfandel just seemed to be this perfect match. Every time I turned my head, I was finding these different expressions from different parts of California. It really intrigued me. That's what gave me the itch to keep after it. When I joined Ridge in '96, I was working down at Montebello with Paul Draper. And then in 1998, I started coming up here to Lytton Springs. And then in '99, oversaw the construction of the new straw bale winery, so that when we finally finished it in 2003, we could full-time be making the majority of our Zinfandels right here on site. The idea to build a straw bale winery was actually Paul's. And when we sat down with the architects and said that we want to build an 18,000 square foot straw bale building with 18-foot walls, their jaws dropped, because no one had ever built a straw bale structure of that proportion. And it took quite a while just to find someone willing to stack straw bales and weigh them down with big cement buckets and go out in the vineyard and shovel a bunch of dirt and mix it with sand and then put some straw in it and make this sort of adobe that is what the walls are plastered with. So it was a really unique experience to go through. And straw, of course, is a renewable resource. We have solar panels on the roof, so we're producing about 2/3 of our electricity here on site. So we're looking at what we can do to really be responsible stewards of the earth. Building a winery made of straw bales, which is covered in earth that's simply taken out of the vineyard, it really makes sense. It's kind of a continuum. After all, what is wine, right? Wine is this juice, it's like liquid earth that comes from the vine that we're able to just transform into something that's delicious, that can be shared, and really connects us. What's really special about Lytton Springs, in part because of that field blend, but we also think in part because of the soil and also the lower yields from old vines, it's one of those few Zinfandel-based wines that really ages beautifully.
The Lytton one is more tannic. Part of that is Petit Syrah, part of that is the different soils. So it takes longer to come around. We release it typically later, only because it really begins to show its depth and its individuality with time.
As we increased our commitment in terms of building a winery here and kind of consolidating most of our Zinfandel vineyards to Sonoma County, we've been able to develop a terrific team. And today we have our viticulturist, Mauro Maldonado, who looks after all the vineyards up here in Sonoma County, and Shauna Rosenblum, who joined us in 2022. Shauna comes from a history, a family, the Rosenblums. When I see that 50th anniversary on a bottle of Lytton Springs, it just reminds me of all of the vintages, all of the hard work, all of the effort that's gone into all of the wines at Ridge, and the teamwork, the energy, and the passion for great wine.